Hi there, welcome back to Ralph's Sort of True Stories. Now you'll remember where we left off. We were touching on rodeos. Now I got a couple more rodeo stories for you, and then, a few other stories that are more or less true. Now, for those of you who don't know a whole lot about rodeos, in bull riding, bareback bronc riding, and saddle bronc riding, kind of one of the important things is to stay on for 8 seconds. And there's a bunch of other rules about what you have to do to get a lot of points while you're doing that ride, but 8 seconds is the important thing. Now, one other thing that can happen when you're riding a bronc is he can do a thing that's called a sun belly. Now, a sun belly is when that bucket bronc actually bucks so much he kind of turns his belly to the sun, and at that point, the cowboy is kind of going to be the victim of gravity. So in this story, this fella, Buck was his name, and he was on a bucket bronco, interestingly. He was out, and he'd just been out of the chute, and this horse did a sun belly, and the next thing you know, Buck wakes up in the hospital. He comes to, and he looks up, and there's this nurse leaning over him, and she says very sincerely, she says, "Sir, I'm sorry, but you may not feel anything below the waist." So Buck, being positive, he looks up and he says, "Oh, well, does that mean I can squeeze your boobs?" Always looking for something, that old Buck. And remember about that 8 seconds. There's one other story Buck told me. He says to me, he says, "Now, Ralph, do you know what rodeo sex is?" I said, "No, I never heard of rodeo sex." He says, "Well, you come up behind your girlfriend or your wife and you get into position, and then you lean over and whisper in her ear, 'You know, sweetheart, this is the position your sister likes the best.' And then you try to hold on for 8 seconds. That'd be something to see." You know, we've been talking about cowboys, and one thing that goes together is cowboys and poems. All around the country, there's cowboy poetry readings. And I'd like to share one of those cowboy poems with you from a fellow that wrote it is Mel Butts. He lives right here in Cave Creek. Mel's done a lot of ranching. He was a saddle maker and all, and his poem's called "The Cowboy and the Preacher." A cowboy and a preacher were having a discourse when the preacher told the cowboy he had to sell his horse. The cowboy said, "I could use another bronc. How much money do you want?" The cowboy went out and checked the horse, and he seemed okay. They sat around and dickered about how much he'd have to pay. The cowboy said, "I'd really like to buy him, but first I'd like him to take him out to the ranch and try him." The cowboy was loading him in the trailer, getting ready to go, when the preacher said, "There's something about this horse you ought to know. You have to say 'Jesus Christ' just to make him run, and then he'll jump forward like a bullet from a gun. To make him stop, you merely say 'Amen.' He'll come to a sliding stop right there and then." The cowboy heard the preacher, but he didn't pay him any heed. He was anxious to get to the ranch and try out his new steed. He got back to the ranch and tried him. He was good at all things but one. The horse wouldn't get out of a trot. The old horse, he wouldn't run. The cowboy got all frustrated. He wanted to have a little fun, and he said, "Old horse, Jesus Christ, why can't you run?" Now the horse jumped forward like he was shot from a cannon, and he was headed straight to the edge of Jack's Canyon. The cowboy yelled out, "Whoa!" and pulled back on the rein, but the horse kept on running as if he were insane. The cowboy said, "Old horse, you better stop or learn to fly, 'cause if you don't, in a second or two, we both are gonna die." Now the cowboy thought, "Oh, it's all over. This has got to be the end." So he said a short prayer and shouted out, "Amen." The horse came to a sliding stop right up to the canyon's edge. The cowboy heard some pebbles just a-bouncing off a ledge. He leaned forward in the saddle right up to the horse's head. He looked down 200 feet. "Jesus Christ," he said. So we know that the cowboy didn't write the poem because he went about 200 feet right away. Well, toodaloo, buckaroos, and thanks for watching Ralph's Sort of True Stories. Now, before you go, down there at the bottom below the screen, there's a little place with a thumbs up. Need you to hit that thing and then move over to the right. They got a thing called subscribe. Click on that, and next to that there's a little bell. Hit that bell, and that way you'll get a notification whenever we put up some new videos. And again, I want to thank you for watching Ralph's Sort of True Stories.